it was an exit strategy, and I had convinced myself of this good thing, which is I was done with corporate. And I was also slowly becoming seriously burned out. PTSD, I was really done. Quite at the end of my rope, I think, for corporate. I couldn't have signed another contract. So it was a bit, I needed an exit strategy to get out. And so good motivation. I want to get back to the U.S. I want to see my kids, my grandkids. I'm terribly overdone in the corporate world. I need a serious, 5-year break or something. I'm motivated, so I'm a risk taker. I'm super well motivated. I'm going to take some risks, and so I think starting the book was these intentional things, and they were supposed to ultimately help me. But what happened along the way was I started realizing the potential of the idea I had, and that it would be more about the people I would meet and the journey and not about me.
Hi, and welcome to the Sunday Lunch Project Manager podcast for Sunday, the 16th of July, 2023. This is your host, Nigel Creaser, and today I've got the first part of my conversation with Ken Stearns, the guy with a jar. Speak soon. So, what's been going on with me? It's been a bit quieter at work, actually, so I've had a bit of time for reflection, kind of looking at a little bit of training, a little bit of thinking about how I can change things in the office and kind of help to other parts of the community, which is quite good. Gives you a little bit of headspace, so rather than it being full on all the time. We've got bunch of guests coming up. I've got a few that I've had to cancel because I've had some problems with my ear. I've had a historic problem where I get blocked ear and I can't hear properly, so having these conversations is rather uncomfortable trying to do, so I've decided to pull a few of them, which means I've got a few in the hopper backed up, and I've got two that I've got to fix because they didn't record right. So we've still got lots of people interested coming on the show, a few scheduled for after my summer break. So that's great, and if you know of anyone or you want to be on the show, just get in touch. Be on the show at nigelcreaser.com and I'll see it. What else has been going on? We had a lot of change going on in the family, with my eldest having her prom, which all went well, and she loved it, enjoyed it, and I was taxiing around late into the evening, and my little one had her last school performance this week, and unfortunately a rained off sports day, which is interesting. It's quite interesting when you go through these different moves from different phases of our life, and I was likening it to when I've been stepping off out of different areas that I've worked in, and you move from something that you're kind of used to, you've got the flow of it, and that change always unsettles. And for us as parents, and for the girls, they are also going through that change and dealing with that change and going through it. So the next few months are going to be interesting from that point of view. Just thinking, oh yes, and what else has happened is that recently I liked playing bass guitar when I was younger. I've had a bass guitar, and I fixed my bass guitar. If any of you follow me on social media, you'll have seen me trying to do some Lutheran on my wooden bass guitar. And I've started having some lessons, which is the first time I've messed around with a bass for many years. So having some fun with that. A couple of friends of mine over at just down the road, and it's with a rock music school, I think it's called, and we basically spend an hour practicing and learning a song, and then jamming it for the last 20 minutes of that hour, which is really good fun. Really enjoyed it, and it's really a real different part of my brain I'm using there, and reawakening a lot of my rock star ambitions that I had when I was in my early 20s, but having a great time with it. and even browsing lots of gadgets, which you always do with these sort of new hobbies, and really enjoying that, and then kind of getting some discipline about the fact that, and I interviewed probably a couple of years ago now, a bass player called Gerald Leonard, who is a jazz bass player, and at the time I never even thought about getting him to play, which was ridiculous. And he talked about how, similarly with project management and similarly with in music, a lot of what you do is the fundamentals, the practice, the going through and rehearse, not actually performing and getting that big adrenaline hit from what you do. And I kind of liken that to project management with our projects, is that we get a lot of the things that we need to do are kind of run of the mill if the project's going okay, but then you get those crazy bits at the end of the project where you are getting it over the line and going on your live or the installation or whatever like that, which can be, you get that buzz out of it. And I think sometimes we get that, and we get post-project blues afterwards because you haven't got that adrenaline buzz until you jump onto a new one, and you're all the different ambiguity of that new project, of how you start it and how you get it going. So I can see a lot of things. I'm trying to discipline myself to do the, in quotes, boring practice and boring scales and things like that. And that's a little bit about what's going on. What else have I seen around? Oh yeah, congratulations to the guys at Project Chatter, who I saw on LinkedIn that they had 150,000 downloads they were celebrating last week. So well done, those guys. They do a great podcast. After you've listened to this, pop along and have a listen to one of theirs. They're really good. I'd love to be in that situation myself. Eventually we will get there, maybe. I'd love for you guys to share my podcast out. It would be brilliant. I always ask and recommend to your friends and colleagues to have a listen. And the final thing was that there is in the UK, the National Podcast Awards. I'll put a link somewhere in the if you go along to nigelcreaser.com/podcast awards, I will do a redirect on there. So if you're doing it, so just podcast awards, all one word, and that should direct you to there. There's a People's Choice area. I would not dream of winning it, but it would be lovely to get a few votes from a few people. It'd be interesting to see what it does, and maybe get a bit more visibility for the show as well. Anyway, I'm going to let you get on and have a listen to Ken, and enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Sunday Lunch Project Manager podcast. I'm delighted to welcome Ken Stearns to the show today. Ken is a grandfather, father, midwestern boy, writer, speaker, photographer and lyricist. In his early 50s, he decided to replace his habit of reading with writing while travelling. Little did he know that this simple change would lead him to a transformative journey of self-discovery and creativity. For 20 years, he's lived in and worked in 15 countries across Asia, immersing himself in the culture, its languages and experiences. Along the way, he found himself consumed by the thoughts inside himself as he fought to be heard. Writing became an outlet, his way of processing the world around him and sharing his details. And Ken, obviously you have a background in your insurance career, kind of helped feed that travel, and I'm sure we're going to get into that. So, Ken, thank you for coming on the show. And do you want to tell the listeners just a little bit more about you? Yeah,
Nigel, thanks for having me. First off, it's kind of when I saw the show and I saw it's project management, and I was like, I love I'm all about that, but I mean that's kind of my old life in a way. So it's kind of this awkward. Do I apply for this to talk to this guy or not? And does it make sense? So, and I think I sent in my note, kind of exactly that, which is. I've got a lot of experience for project management, got a lot of place in my heart for it. Been involved with it for really the 20 years I was in Asia. and so many different PMs coming and going, and teams and projects and different across markets, across countries, just crazy. Kind of fun and being involved with it, and the energy that you get being involved in a project. So it was good fun. It was good fun. I was, as the bio kind of says, I'm a Midwestern kid, a seasoned Midwestern kid, kind of, which means I'm an old guy, and like you said, grandfather and all that good stuff. And I left for Asia when I was about 40. Dragged my family, went over to Asia to be an insurance dude. After being an insurance guy in the U.S. And I had some distribution skills, so I was kind of on the sales management side, and found myself with big companies like AIG, Prudential UK. So I worked for Prudential UK in Asia.
Right.
And they're in about 15 different markets there. And, it's a strong, a long, old company, right? A lot of history and doing things. And so, again, project management for everything that we would do. And that was, as I shared in our pre-chat, I've had, I'm just drawing a blank on the titles, but project owner, project sponsor, project manager. I've been...
program managers and all those,
Another program manager, I mean... I've been that person, and whatever those roles were, and they changed the names over the years, and those sheets became more complex, right? I mean, we're in insurance, and so we were doing, it was mostly IT stuff, right? Would have been a lot of our stuff, IT stuff or process change, which was relatively like an IT project in a way, because it's that sequential order of things, and I'm kind of manufacturing something, but. I'm a different person now, as you can see. We're kind of having that giggle off mic and saying, I was such a monster in corporate life. And I look back, I can't believe I was that person, ungrateful in so many ways. And probably the worst, if I look back, Mike, I'd say a regret, or just looking back and just saying could have been a better person, was definitely grace. Giving people grace. And I think, if I look at, corporate life, and even just for our grace for ourselves, right, in these projects, right, we have these unrealistic timelines. There's no real imminent disaster of, the earth crashing if you miss some deadlines. But the pressure that we put on people and, just the amount of effort that goes into reporting this stuff, I can't imagine the stress and pressure that people are under in the PM world. Like you were sharing offline, having some struggles and really burning out, because it seems like it's just one of these things where it's never over.
No,
do you ever? I mean, you must feel that, right? Yeah. Like it's just you're on that bicycle every day, and you're never cross. Do you ever cross the finish line?
No, I don't think you do. I think there's and kind of in the industry now. There's a lot of sort of with me. I'm in a system integrator, so I work for a system integrator. So our job is delivering projects for people. If you're in a sort of end user business. There's always constant change, but there isn't a.
Yes.
I suppose it is similar that as a project manager, you are moving from one. You just about celebrate the last one, but actually, typically you're already trying to use that energy to start the next one because you've got the kickoff meeting on the following day after you're having a few drinks on Thursday with the guys that have helped you get this other one over. And I interesting conversations I've had with people sometimes is that we have this concept of a project end-to-end project manager in general, where you give a project to a project manager, they start it up, they work out what it's going to be, they put in the controls, they control it all the way through all the delivery, and they use all that energy to get it over the line at the end, which inevitably there's things you need to do, and you've got all these different intensity of energy needed all the way through that, and we expect one person to have that same skills and energy to go all the way through there, and also having used so much energy to get it over the finish line, we then expect them immediately to stand up and be able to use another and different energy source for that ambiguous, amorphous blob that you're trying to form into something to deliver. and I think that bit of it, that's what I see a lot of the time. As you say, you don't really, you cross one line and then you're into something else, and you don't get that re-energization. And it's different skills and it's different behavior patterns and things like that you have to use in all those different phases of those deliveries.
Yeah,
and it's hard. It's hard.
That's an interesting observation. You're right. In the launch, it takes its one skill set. Closing takes a different skill set. Talking to, getting people to give you the time, getting bosses to give up their staff to give you the time. That's a negotiating skill set. Compromising. Then going and getting, and then going trying to not pull everybody's pants down in the update meeting when no one's given you what they're supposed to give you.
Yeah, it
is a tough. Yeah, I've seen some amazingly talented people in that space. Like some of the names through my years, 20 years, about 5 companies, and I look at the different countries and organizations. Some of the names and faces of people that stick out are the project people. Interestingly, if I look back on my career,
I can see that because fundamentally there's so much relationship building needed in project management and the relationships and the people get their work done. It isn't the processes and procedures, and therefore I think that is the reason why is because you get those relationships need to be deep in my view for it to be successful.
Yeah, they're communicating across lines, across departments, across teams. So maybe I'll share a little bit about what I'm doing now, and it's a funny, a funny side story to it. Is it's one big project. I became the project sponsor, manager, owner, builder, deliverable guy. I was the everything project manager. About when I was 52-ish was when I started doing this. Started writing stuff and not consuming. Everything on airplanes and airports, and trying to write notes and trying to find, I just had some inspiration to write a book, and it was a book, Dear Dad, and it was letters to my father, and these were, my dad died when I was 28, and I had all these corporate things happen I would love to share with a corporate guy. My dad was a corporate guy, I just wanted to share all this, my journey, and he wasn't there, so I started writing letters. And then that morphed into another book over time, and all that got kind of put aside because, there is one thing I think when you're in these jobs, especially too like the project stuff or even any work where it's so intense, there's almost no room for anything else. Yeah. Like the fact that you start a podcast is impressive because amongst everything else, you've got to carve out this mental space to create. And to be, and to come up with something. So anyway, I started planning about what am I going to do when I grow up? What am I going to do when I quit corporate? What am I going to do when I'm 70? I don't want to be. I don't want to be one of those people that retires at 65 and then dies at 66. Right? That's just not the way to go. Those people planned poorly.
Or we're unlucky.
So I was like. Yeah, unlucky. Yeah, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but I'm just going to I'm sticking with mine. That was a bad plan. And so I started thinking intentionally about what I'm going to do. And I started this writing. I picked up a guitar at 52, started playing guitar. I dragged my camera everywhere with me. I never left the house without my camera. I shot anything I could shoot just to be creative, to look at life through a frame. Yeah. And to try to live like that and try to see and anticipate, an image. And that kind of intentionality ultimately gave me this idea for the podcast. And so I finished a book called Dear God, and it's a kind of a spiritual questioning of ideas with God, a conversation I'm having with God about your past, your present, your future, your acceptance, compassion, forgiveness, love, karma, service, faith, hope, and prayer. So I had this book with 12 topics I was chatting with God about, in it's letters. I'm writing these letters.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that led me down to this idea of turning that into a podcast. Don't ask God, ask your fellow mankind. So start asking people these questions about these ideas I've got about love, about acceptance, forgiveness. I got all these ideas that I've collected from people and life experiences. I put them together. And so I took the book, Nigel, and I wrote 400 questions. So I took these letters, put them on the computer one by one, and looked at that and said, what is the idea in that letter? In this particular letter, what am I asking? What am I after? What am I validating? And then I sat on the side and wrote questions. So I ended up with 444 questions, print these things out, beautiful cards, and put them in these giant jars a giant jar that I had made. So I had so you can, and then I'm gonna get my butt back to America. I'm gonna buy a van, put some graphics on it, get these jars made, get the questions printed, buy gear, learn how to record remotely in people's homes, and drive around to 111 cities and interview 444 people.
It's interesting that
it's
I
damn
looked on
good
your
I got a
website.
project management. Yeah.
Yeah. I looked on your website and looked at there's a map. You've got a map on there of your journey.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I wasn't quite sure whether that journey is still ongoing or whether it's come to an end now, or is it kind of going out? But mind-boggling, that map you've got there. It's however many hundred. Obviously, I live in the UK. Yeah, 50 miles is a long way for me to drive somewhere. It's kind of like with you guys. It's like it's funny. I was listening to something about sport the other day, and they were talking about people coming over to the UK to come and see from the States to watch football teams, and things like that, and soccer teams.
Yeah.
And they were talking to someone about the fact that, Wrexham is not far from me, and I'm not sure if you've heard of Wrexham soccer team. They've kind of Ryan Reynolds bought and that, but it's you've got Liverpool and you've got Manchester, two of the biggest football team sort of cities in the country, and it's a half-hour drive between them two, and then about a half-hour drive again to Wrexham, and then they were talking to these people out there, and they're saying, well, we if we want to go and watch an MLS game, we've got a 4-hour journey or a 5-hour journey to the next team. And it's kind of like, we can do the whole of the UK here. So I still blows my mind at how big that country of yours is. So
it is. There are some, even for me too, I'm driving. I haven't been here in 20 years, so I'm driving it still, and it's big.
Yeah.
Yeah, the map was fun. So I had, when I was crafting everything still in that brainstorming stage and building the idea out, I had probably the wet dream for every PM in the world. In my apartment, on one wall, I had 4 whiteboards drilled into the wall.
Yeah.
So my whole hallway was whiteboards on one side, and on the I had. So imagine 4 of those vertically. So flip them and just drill them. So it was, about 5 foot tall and about, 12 feet long whiteboard, basically. And I just stand there every day with a cup of coffee, in the shower, out of the shower, staring at it, wiping it down, rewriting. And on the other side, I had my map. I had a giant plastic map that I started drawing the rough, which way, by what time, and, starting to sketch it out before I put it onto the computer, and making sure I could follow the sun, stay with the summer, be in the right places at the right time. So, I'll tell you, man, it's a good thing I had a lot of project management skills, because it's quite a thing to look back now and to realize what I did and what I've done, and accomplished quite a bit for I'd say not one person. I have a small team, but definitely in the beginning it was just me.
Yeah. It's an interesting.
Great. Yeah.
I was going to say it reminds me of a thing I saw not long ago on Prime. I think it was Iron Cowboy, the Ironman triathlete, and I can't remember his name, who did all the states in the US. He did an Ironman in every state one day after another, and it's a kind of similar sort of. And when I've seen people doing marathons where they're running through different states and stuff, and it's kind of plotting out where they go to, and it's not always the actual event bit that's the difficult bit, is it? It's getting to the event bit and getting away afterwards so that you're in time to get somewhere else. And I know there was one with someone doing marathons where they're getting to I can't remember where it was now, but basically they had a boat that left to this island where they were going to run this thing, and it went once every week. So if they missed it, they missed their whole thing's not done, or something like that. You know what I mean? It was that level of thing.
Once a week, right?
No choice. Yeah, no choice. Make it. Otherwise, you don't get there to do what you're going to do and then come back. And it's kind of, I imagine but that logistics work and event logistics. And I had Jen Santos on recently when she was talking about big conference logistics and these organising of events. I've got this kind of thing for you when you're doing it on your own, and then when you've got groups of people in there involved in these things, it starts to exacerbate and kind of. It's not linear in complexity, is it? You've got that multi-communication and multi-dependency.
Yeah. I mean, the good news was decisions started and stopped with me, right? So there wasn't, I was in a vacuum doing it. So what made you when you start doing conferences?
Yeah, what made you do it? What was it what was in your mind when you sat back and thought, I've got this idea to do this? What did you want to get out of it, and what did you want to give to the world?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one even I'm still sometimes I come and go on the answer, and I'm not sure. It started out being about me getting back to the U.S., having an exit. I called it at the time I was calling it my exit strategy, air quotes. Right. It's like, how do I get out of Asia? And, it's a particular tough because I was an expert and my skills don't translate. I never could have gotten I could have got some kind of insurance job in the U.S., but nothing remotely close to the kind of job I had. So
why was that? What was the kind of work you were doing?
I was a distribution person. So I was in management. And executive leadership, sat at the table, and a lot of it was also distribution. And the distribution model, the products, the style is so different in Asia now compared to the U.S. And
so is that market speciality sort of thing?
Yeah, it was market speciality, really. It was market speciality. And I think even the broad general management leadership thing, I could have gone in anywhere, any insurance company I would have gone in, I could add value tomorrow. There's no doubt. But I think the difficulty would be for people to get their heads around that, just looking at my experience, right? And they'd rather find somebody in the local market, an American market that had a U.S. experience. That was my guess. Anyway, it was an exit strategy, and I had convinced myself of this good thing, which is I was done with corporate. And I was also slowly becoming seriously burned out. PTSD, I was really done. Quite at the end of my rope, I think, for corporate. I couldn't have signed another contract. So it was I needed an exit strategy to get out, and so good motivation. I want to get back to the U.S. I want to see my kids, my grandkids. I'm terribly overdone in the corporate world. I need a serious, 5-year break or something. I'm motivated, so I'm a risk taker. I'm super well motivated. I'm going to take some risks, and so I think starting the book was these intentional things, and they were supposed to ultimately help me. But what happened along the way was I started realizing the potential of the idea I had, and that it would be more about the people I would meet and the journey and not about me. My part would happen as a natural outcome. Like whatever happens for me from the opportunities will happen not because of something I did for myself, but it's going to be because I'm focused on the guests, the show, the outcome, the benefit, the communicating people's stories, giving people a platform to tell their story that no one listens to. The reality is, I just did a show the other day, and it just, there's some comments guests make sometimes which just really hit me hard, and I'm like, damn, that's why I'm doing this. So I had a young lady. I knew when she described her address, I knew what I was in for. She called it lot number, or lot number, and a lot number is going to mean it's a trailer park.
Yeah.
And the town I was in, there aren't any real nice trailer parks. I was in a small part in the South. This was going to be, not a beautiful place, but it was going to be a good human there, right? But it's going to be a rough neighborhood. And sure enough, not the greatest place to live, but it was her home, and her story was pretty powerful. And I won't get into the story because it was more about at the end of it, when she finished, and we kind of took off our headphones and sat there, and she said, "No one's ever listened to me like that before in my life."
Yeah. Yeah, it's
and
powerful.
It broke my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it partly broke my heart. It made me feel warm and sad all at the same time. Like, I was that guy, and I rocked up here in my van, and I pulled my jar out, and we set up, and I listened to her as she told her story through the jar. And
that's crazy.
It was fucked up, crazy story, too. Man, she's been in prison a few times, been on the street since she was 12. Running from bad stuff in New York.
Yeah.
It was a hard story. And for when she finished it and said that, I was like, whew, that's heavy. You got to carry that around for a little while, knowing that there's, and she's not the only person like that, right? There's, so many of us never get to tell our story and to have people listen to it and be able to share, what's gone. And I think in the jar, it's what's gone right, what's gone wrong, what's been good, what's been bad. So it's an emotional journey through your life, but it's also with those human filter. The topics are very human-y. So there are also these very deep human essence of who you are kind of conversation. So it is. I started for myself. Long of the answer to the short question. Yeah, sure. I started this really to get back and for myself. And what it's come to be is it's not at all about me.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's funny. I can see some not as extreme parallels because I think what I'm doing is very focused on a certain sort of area and stuff. But originally when I started it was about talking to project managers and finding about how they got into project management, doing that little backstory of them and interviews. And there was quite a few things about what people want to do when they're kids and that sort of thing. So, and I need to get back to some more of those. I've just, I've tended to kind of gone through into the kind of more tangential stuff as well as, I've got a few people who I've got lined up. I know I want to talk to. It's just getting diaries synced and things. But there was one I remember talking to a gentleman who was based from Turkey. Was it Turkey? Was it? No, it wasn't. It was Cyprus originally. And I asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, and his answer was safe, because he lived.
Wow.
He was growing up around the time when there was the trouble in Cyprus with Greece and Turkey and things like that. And I was. It's not often that I'm dumbstruck, and I sat there going, "Wow, that just." And again, we talked before the call about you and I in roles in relatively safe organisations, privileged sort of background kind of thing relative to a lot of people, and we don't recognise it. But when you hear those conversations, you have those things spoken to you, you realise that kind of has that humility that you have, that you can learn from there. And it's I don't know, it just gives you a better lens on it. And I've learned a lot from the different conversations about how people have, whether they have had discrimination, whether they've had opportunities blocked from them, or when and recently I had Kim Hamer on, who was talking about bereavement and serious illness in the office, and how her experience with her husband and in passing away was, from a corporate point of view, was a positive one. She had someone who was battling for him on his behalf, despite them not being particularly supportive of each other. And then when she moved on, after that, she moved on to another organisation. She saw her manager in a place going through the similar sort of thing with their partner, and they didn't have anywhere near the same level of support from the organisation. And it shocks you that you get those different things. And I learned so much on that podcast about how bad I was at dealing with people in those environments and trying to help them, and when I've been through similar things, how I could have handled it better. And I think this kind of head into a little rabbit hole of podcasting. I think for me, it's surprised me what it's given. And as I said to you, I was thinking about stopping it quite a while back, and we both get masterclasses on humility, on information, on people's experience, on what they've done, and do you know what I mean? We get those lessons that actually, I think if I went to a training course with work, which would be no disrespect to a training course, a 1 hour course on dealing with staff with bereavement, I wouldn't have learnt as much as I did listening and talking to Ken and being able to ask those questions. And it's just, and hopefully people get the value from it listening as well. I hope you enjoyed the first part of that conversation with Ken. Come back next week and find out what the rest of his adventures are. Stop recording, Nige. So this is my final wrap up. Every week you're going to hear this. You're going to get bored of it, but you can always click next podcast if so. If you have enjoyed it, if you listened to this podcast to the end of this show and you think that was great, I'd love to be able to help Nige out. There are loads of ways you can do it. The first and obvious way is to share the podcast. Send it out to people. If you know colleagues and friends who'd benefit from it, you think they'd enjoy it, just send them the link. Grab one of the links, or send them to www.nigelcreaser.com/podcasts. That's www.nigelcreaser.com/podcasts, and that will push them over to a Linktree link, and it's got all of the different ways they can consume the podcast. If you are feeling generous and have a big bag of cash, you could grab a copy of one of my books. Obviously, they're available in all the usual places, in print and digital. Again, jump on the website, www.nigelcreaser.com/shop, and that will give you a list of all the different ways that you can contribute and grab copies of the book. Also got links to all my guests' books on there as well, where I get a little bit of a kickback from them. If you are of a sporting mind, I have a number through doing some of my judo and running antics. I've managed to secure a few affiliate links and affiliates there as well. So in there, somewhere in the sponsors page, there's links to those as well. So clicking onto those and grabbing if you're looking to get super fit, then that would be fabulous as well, and I get a little kickback from those. I have a Patreon account. It's patreon.com/sundaylunchpm. So again, you can ping something in there, buy me a coffee or whatever. And finally, obviously the most important is coming back, listen again, because the more of you that come back, the more visibility I get, because there's more times that it's downloaded and all the SEO works and things like that. So yeah, that's it. So if you can help me out, I would be much appreciated. If you can't, don't worry about it. Thank you very much. Cheers now. Bye. Well, it's goodbye from me, Nigel Creaser, and it's goodbye from him, the Sunday Lunch PM. Goodbye.